Hey everyone, before we start on this video, just understand I've been working on editing this one for a couple of months because with all the filming that I did, the video was over 2 hours long, right? And I knew no one was going to sit for over 2 hours watching me talk and work on a 98. So I've been working on editing it out, that kind of thing, to where now we're going to be right around the 45 to 50 minute mark. Maybe somebody will actually watch that. But I wanted to sit here and say that moving forward, I'm going to try to do better. But this video is going to be very choppy. In fact, I have cut the entire introduction that I did, and just going to do this one right fast. So, yeah. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoy. Alright, so I've already kind of started working on this stock, right? But what I'm basically doing is this had a thick coat of like a shiny polyurethane. You can still kind of see the shiny parts, right? Now what I used to kind of help get this off, right, is some of this Ready Strip Advance, right? I picked this up just at my local hardware store. It is really and truly great stuff, and it's eco-friendly, right? It doesn't smell great, but it doesn't smell bad at all. And then I get this little guy, right? Which, like I said, I've used it quite a bit last night and this morning, but I wanted to just show a little bit. This is basically a scraper, right? So here on one end, you hear it? It's actually got a little bit of a edge to it. Now, it's not super sharp. I can sit here and rub my thumb along it, right? I can rub my thumb along here, right? And it's not going to cut it. Now, if I sit here and put a lot of pressure, then yeah, of course it's going to cut me, right? But pretty much you can pick these up. You can make these, yeah. I mean, I think I spent $5 on this at my hardware store as well. It's a good flexible material, and I'll clean it all back up once I'm done with this job. But basically what you do is you keep it at the angle, so the cutting edge, it's not really cutting, is at the right angle, and you just sit here and make sawdust, right? And all I'm doing is finding these shiny spots and taking them right off. That is all I'm doing. And I'm going to do that on this entire stock. I've gotten most of it done. Everywhere else I just need to clean it. But this stock is off of a 98 Mauser, right? Made in 1939. It had a bunch of issues with it. One of the issues was the barrel band, right? You see it has 2 holes drilled into this barrel band. That's because they had screws in there. Why did they have screws in there? Because this was duffel cut, right? And that's how they fixed it, right? So yeah, it's not a very good fix, but I guess it worked for all these years. So I'm going to be fixing that as well, but first I've got to get all this old finish off. And then I'll clean everything up with warm water. Take your spoon out and throw it away. Sorry. Clean all this up with warm water. Let it completely dry, which will take probably a day. And then I'm going to go in and start repairing this. So yeah, because this is where it gets a little fun. Let me rearrange the camera. It needs to be lined up and square like this. If I get it off like this, bad things are going to happen. So once I get all of this scraped, clean, looking good, right? Then I can actually, well, I'm doing work outside of camera angles there, Kilted, come on. But I can sit here once again, just get everything nice and wiped off and clean. Because that's another reason that I really like this product, is it's not going to continue to eat, right? So you see, like this is the reinforcement bar, right? How it's just turned nice and white. That means that it is spent. It is done. It's not going to do any more, so on and so forth. But whoever did this finish, once again, it was years ago. I mean, they even did the takedown, right? And then at some point in time, someone came in here and put standard sling swivels through it, rather than actually use, you know, the sling portion. And this customer isn't wanting to get it back 100% original. He just wants it really and truly looking better, right? He basically wants to pass what I call the 10-foot sniff test, right? If you're 10 foot away, this looks like a really good all original gun, but once you get up on it, yeah, you'll notice that it's not. Now, something else this customer had me do is, he says his eyesight is not what it used to be, but which is understandable. That happens to all of us, right? But he didn't want to put a modern scope on there because that would just look ridiculous compared to what he wants to do. So he actually went out and bought I believe it's original. I haven't looked at it that closely, but it's either an original or an old reproduction of the ZF-41 scope, and I'll show that in another video, or part of this video, right? Because this is going to be a several day project of where I just mounted the scope mount on the rear sight. So yeah. But anyways, I'm going to spend probably about another half hour or so on this. I'll have a whole hour completely in this so far. But yeah. Alright, so I've gotten everything pretty much cleaned off, right? But what inevitably happens is you can sit here and feel it, right? And that wood grain's not very happy, right? So I've wiped it down a little bit with some water, which has helped. But now what I'm going to do is start the wet sanding. So I start off with a 600 grit, and I'm going to work all the way up to about 1500, right? And that's really simple. I just take a bottle of water, coat a little area, and then just very lightly, I'm not applying any major pressure, but what this is going to do is knock some of that grain back down, and if there's any holes in the grain, it'll fill them up. So once I mean, you can see, right? I mean, I'm not pushing very hard at all. Then I can basically come in with a paper towel, dry it off a little bit, and that's already feeling 10 times better, right? So that's all we're going to do now, is I'm just going to sit here and find another spot, pour a little bit of water. Oh my God, you're getting water all over your shop. It's okay, it's water. I live in Mississippi. It is the middle of January, and it's 75 damn degrees outside, right? And once again, I'm not applying a lot of pressure, right? Now what this is doing is not only getting the little fine hairs of wood basically lay down or get taken off, but if I have any polyurethane left on there, I mean look, and most of that is just water, right? If I have any little speck of polyurethane or something I missed in the first treatment, then it'll get that off as well. Alright, so we've gotten it done with the 16 And you can kind of sit here and see, you know, it looks really good. Granted, we still got all these dents and dings and marks and that kind of thing. I'm not worried about those, right? Let me set this back up. Come on. Come on, get it right now. But now I'm pretty much going to repeat the entire process with a sheet of 15. Now, why do I do 15? I've just gotten better results when I go back and put a linseed oil finish on this, right? And I know some people are going to sit here and go, oh, well, originally it was... I get that, right? But the customer wants linseed oil. I have informed the customer of what it was originally. And, yeah, he was like, nope, I want linseed oil. So, sounds good to me. So anyways, I'm going to have a few more minutes just doing this. And, yeah. Alrighty. So this is what we got. Right? Once again, I left all the dents and dings and that kind of thing. Right? But everything else is nice, smooth, cleaned up. Everything else. I'm not going to fill in the holes for the sling swivel. The customer does not want that. Right? And yeah, now just to kind of set this over and let it dry for a little while. And I'll go ahead and work on everything else. So, yeah. All right, so this is what we've got so far, right? So as you see, it's now back to this beautiful blonde wood. There's a couple of spots that I still need to go over with a little bit more sandpaper and that kind of thing. I've got some areas right down here, you can't see it, right down here in the grip that's still just a little rough. There was a rough patch, there it is, right in here. Just little touch-up areas that I need to do, but I'm going to angle you upward now. All right, come on, there we go. Now, why is that green tape there? That is for me fixing the duffel cut, okay? And if I angle you up a little bit more, there we go, you can actually see the cleaning rod is still in here and it's screwed in. Now, what I basically did to fix that is really quite simple, but I don't like showing it because it is like making sausage, right? And not everybody wants to see that because it is a very gross, very nasty thing to do. Basically, I had a piece of stainless steel tubing, right, that I cut to the length that I wanted. I then cut, well, I didn't cut it in half, but I measured it out into halves so that I can actually drill half of it up in here, half of it actually down into the stock. Now, I couldn't go fully in half just because of where the cleaning rod actually screws in, right? There is a little block right about here, right? And so this end's got a little bit more than the bottom end, but that's okay. I then AccuGlassed it up. For those of you that don't know what AccuGlass is, I love this stuff, especially the gel. What it basically is a binary compound, right? That when you mix it up, it's kind of got this creamy color to it, right? And then you can dye it just about any color that you want. I like dyeing stuff black, right? One, it will kind of take on the look of grain, and two, to me it just looks better, plain and simple. I have in the past stained them red. I've stained one blue, but that was for a completely different project. So yeah, you can stain it, right? Brownell sells that. It's fairly cheap, right? But it is kind of a mess to work with. But then I applied it to the tubing. After scuffing up the tubing really well, I filled in the holes with it. I then coated both sides of the joint, right? So I coated this side and smushed it together, and actually had rubber bands tied in to kind of keep it centered and down. And then once it set up, gotta love when the phone goes off, but basically epoxied everything together, got it sutured down, and you can really work with AccuGlass for about 20 minutes before it actually starts hardening up. At least that's my experience. And you squish everything together, get a nice ooze out. That way you know you have good coverage on everything. And then I let it set up for about another half hour to an hour. I don't recall exactly. But then I pulled off the rubber bands essentially, made sure everything was still nice and square up here and as well in the channel, right? Then when I got done with all of that, I went ahead and wrapped a little bit of just this painter's tape in, right? Because the painter's tape is not going to pull off any finish because there's no finish left on the gun. And it's not going to be difficult to remove, okay? I know there's been people in the past, in fact, my mentor, he was a big fan of getting the extra wide electrical tape and wrapping it around because it would stretch and it wanted to contract and that kind of thing, and he really liked it. I don't, because I have ran into situations in the past with it to where I just don't like using it, but that's my preference. So the next time you see this, I will be refinishing the entire thing, so on and so forth, and yeah. Alrighty, so we are done, right? So once again, I've refinished the stock. This is about 3 coats of linseed oil on it. I repaired the duffel cut, right? Did a few other things just cleaning wise, and I also installed this aftermarket sight base for this ZF41. Now, how it basically works is it rides very snugly right now on this little track, right? And of course you still have your iron sights and that kind of thing, so it can be used without this. And then to install it, you just kind of got to line it up. This is early quick detach, people, so quick is a relative term, but everything works as it should, right? The bolt stays back when it's empty. That is kind of a user thing. That way when you're working the action, you don't actually have to count your rounds. The gun will tell you when it's out of ammunition. So let's load it up and do a little bit of shooting, shall we? Alrighty, so I've got it loaded up with just 3 rounds. Now you're asking yourself, why 3 when it holds 5? This is customer supplied ammo. He ordered some PPU offline. Yeah. And he said that he paid a little over, I want to say like 25 or 27 a box plus shipping. And anybody who's ordered ammunition offline can tell you it's not cheap. So yeah, I'm not going to burn up all of his ammo. I'm just going to do 3 rounds to make sure that the gun fires, the safety works, and I'm able to take it off safe and fire it again, and that kind of thing. So without further ado, now what I will show you is the flag safety. This is the safety here, right? So that side's safe, this side's fire, okay? So let's try firing one first. Now I'm not working this bolt super hard. I just don't. Safety's on, trigger does not work. There's 2. That's a little harder. There's 3. So there we go. That's pretty much it. She shot beautifully. and I'm going to pick up this brass right now. Alright, so now I just want to kind of cover a few things. If you're wanting to get into this, okay? There are a couple of things you can look at, which I don't know how well the film's gonna, or the camera's gonna show up, but you can see there is a difference in the finish here, right, between this reproduction part here. Okay, good. Sorry, my daughter's out here playing. Child labor laws, you know, but she likes picking up shotgun hulls off the ground and putting them in a bucket. So anyways, but the finish, like I was talking about here, right, you see it's just a little different. That's usually a good sign that, you know, this piece here is a reproduction. Okay, a couple other things is you can always check out the stocks, right? So like this one looks clean, looks smooth, so on and so forth, and you can just barely make out a little bit of information on the stock, okay, but it's about gone. I tried my best to save as much of it as I could. Another thing that you can always do is just take a look at the fit and finish of everything, right? Now what I will say is if you really want to buy one of these for collector value, right, so not just a shooter but an actual collector value, there are a mountain of books that you can go out and get. There's little electronic books, actual like old-timer books like I like to use with actual paper and, you know, dead trees and that kind of thing, right? I like those. But anyways, you can, there are a mountain of books that'll sit here and tell you, you know, factory codes, serial number ranges, so on and so forth, right? To where if you have somebody that's selling one, it gives you a good idea on what they actually have and will give you an idea if it's in the right stock, if it's the right bolt, if it's the right sights, if it's the right this, the right that. Because this customer did something that I don't like, right? Just because of how he did it, and that's putting on the sight hood, right? But if you sit here and look towards the back, you can see shiny metal, right? You can see it on this side as well, right? So what this customer wanted was he bought this thing fairly cheap, and he wanted it to look like one that he saw in, I believe, a picture, or maybe it was one that a family member had. I don't recall, but he no longer has, right? So he's doing everything to make it look like the one in the picture, right? And in doing so, he basically just took a file and started filing. He nicked the barrel here and up here, right? So those are very bright things to look at, right? So on and so forth. Again, I'm going to take this back inside, and then we're going to sit here and talk about a little bit of the history. All right, so now I'm going to sit here and do a little bit of history. I decided to put notes on my phone rather than on a piece of paper, so excuse the phone. But roughly between 1935 and 1945, there were about, of all variants of the K98 or Car 98 and all its variants, right? About 14 million were made. Now that brings up the question, well, if 14 million of them were made, why are they so expensive? Okay, you have to take into consideration, first off, that the Soviet troops captured several million of them, right? Yeah, so much so that I forget where it's at, but they actually have a graveyard in a small little town of soldiers who died during World War II, and the fence around it is made out of the barreled actions of, you know, K98s, German guns, right? Now, You also have to sit here and realize that out of all of those, about 130,000 of them were actually designated the actual sniper model. Once again, if you believe, if you see one at auction or sale, there's books that actually have the serial number ranges and that kind of thing. Because, hey, one good thing the Germans did was they were notorious for paperwork, right? So, yeah, there's that. All right, so let's actually sit here and talk about stocks, right? Once again, they started production of the 98K, as we pretty much know it as, or the K98, depending on what circles that you're in 35. Now, starting in 37, they actually started doing laminated stock. So you see what looks to be grain that is perfectly straight and everything else. That's not grain. That is actually pieces of wood that were cut and glued together, much like plywood. Right? So let me set that off to the side for just a minute. That way I can discuss this. Now, they did this because of several factors. One, it's cheaper because you don't have to wait for a tree to fully mature, and you don't have to worry about, hey, we can't use this one because it's got a giant knot in it, yada, 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 right? You can take immature trees, or actually to the extent of scrap lumber, parts of the tree that were actually shaved off to make it square, to make everything else, glue them all together, and they turned out to be stronger, a little heavier than your standard stocks, but they were mostly looking at price, right? When you're talking about producing millions of these, every cent counts, right? Now, something else about it is most were laminated walnut or beech. There were some that were laminated with elm wood. Very few though. So yeah, there's that. And when I say very few, we're not talking about two or three. We're talking about maybe 2% of all the stocks, right? Now, another thing we're going to sit here and talk about is the steel butt plate. All of these were made out of steel that were general use. Now, they did play around with some brass. They played around with aluminum because, once again, it was, well, the brass was a little bit cheaper, but it didn't hold up as well in their testing. And aluminum, while expensive at the time, also did not go very well. Now, from 35 until the mid 40s, okay, they actually just had these flat ones, right? And then it kind of turned into the cupped ones, where you've probably seen footage of them to where the steel wraps all the way around, right? Now, you might sit here and ask yourself why. You know, they're right in the middle of the war. Why would they spend more money, you know, redesigning their stocks, setting up new tooling to make this cupped piece? And that's actually quite simple, because they were getting cracks. So you see this nasty, gnarly crack here, right? Now, this has been repaired sometime in the past, and it's been there for a while, right? But you can see it continues over here. So this whole chunk, at some point in time, either came off or came very close to coming off, right? Now, when that happened in the field, now you've got a gun that you cannot properly shoulder, right? So your accuracy goes down. Then the stock, or the whole rifle, has to go back for rework, which is taking more time, more men, more everything to fix this. They finally decided doing the cup. It actually does protect the stock from splitting a fair amount. Now, something else that some of you might know, but maybe not everyone, is this little ring, right? This little ring, and I'm not going to demonstrate how it's actually used, right? Because really and truly, for 99% of people, are not going to be out in the field for weeks on end and need to use this, okay? But this is a bolt disassembly tool, right? So once again, it's a whole process, but you could actually disassemble your bolt for good maintenance and cleaning, Now, to move up to the bolt a little bit, right? Of course, we have this huge cutout right here, right? I mean, it lines up all the way to the other side. I mean, this is almost perfectly flush. Now, why do that? Because it does, quote unquote, weaken the receiver a little, right? Not enough to really matter with 8mm. But I know after the war, several people were getting these actions because they were dirt cheap. And they were putting some pretty powerful rounds in there. And I've heard, and I have read reports, but never saw pictures or any of that sort, to where it actually, with some of these big boy cartridges, right? We're talking like, what was it? I think, once again, I could be wrong. I think it was 458 lot, maybe? No. Anyways, it was a big boy cartridge, and right in here, they actually started seeing signs of fatigue. That is all I know, right? Signs of fatigue. But for 8mm, it was perfect. The Germans never got a report of fatigue in 8mm. The nations that used this after World War II, that were still in 8mm and a few other calibers, never had a problem with it. So, like I said, it's negligible, okay? But why did they cut this here? Well, if you look at the top of the receiver, you have this weird U-shaped cutout, right? And that is actually for a stripper clip. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a 98 stripper clips. I need to buy some. I know they make reproductions of them. They're not that expensive, but I always forget that I don't have them until I actually have or go to shoot my 98, right? But basically, you would have 5 rounds on a stripper clip. They would sit into here, and then you would push down, right? Usually with your thumb. So I'm going to kind of do it this way. Yes, I'm still in camera angle. So I put the clip in, take my thumb and push it down, or you can grab the top round and start pushing until you get to that top round, and then push it in, and then work the bolt as normal, right? Now, I discussed this outside while I was shooting, but I also want to discuss it again. So your safety here, right? So it's on fire. Now it's on safe. Not only is the trigger dead, but you see the bolt is locked as well, right? And that was just a good safety feature, right? Yeah, it works well. Now, what we can do as well is this little lever on the side is used to pull out the bolt, right? Now set the gun off to the side. And now I said I was not going to show you disassembly of the bolt, and I'm still not, but it brings up a question. On this bolt, right, there are 3 sections, which I'm going to have to put it back in the gun to really kind of show you. Sorry about that. But if you have it straight up like so, this is actually the takedown portion, right? So, yeah, be careful. Don't try to shoot it or say that it's unsafe like this, because things can happen, right? So, yeah. Now, for basic cleaning and basic maintenance, right, is you just pull out the bolt, clean the gun, so on and so forth, right? But one thing you're going to have to watch is this extractor rotates, right? So make sure that it is all the way in the correct position. Well, how do I know it's in the correct position? When you go to put it in the gun, if it doesn't line up and want to go to at least this point, you're in the wrong spot, okay? Ta-da! So yeah. Now, with the 98 system, after the war, there were several countries that still used them. You know, Yugoslavia used them, and redid a bunch of stuff and turned them into the M48. They had other variants as well. Egypt had quite a few of them when the Germans just kind of left there that were being used. I want to say Turkey also had a bunch of different ones, from the straight pull standard 98 to the 98Ks to, they had a bunch of them. We'll just put it that way. But another one that I have seen quite a few of, well, I wouldn't say quite a few, I've probably seen 8 or 10 of, is actually the ones that were sent to Israel. So when Israel was founded and that kind of thing, they needed weapons, which this isn't getting into political. I don't care what your opinions are on Israel. I really and truly don't. This is history, right? So they would actually get these 98s, right, with all the ugly marks on it, right? And yeah, they completely stripped all of that off. Some even put a stamp of Israel on the receivers. I've heard, I haven't seen one of those, but they were rechambered in 308, right? So they changed quite a bit of it while also keeping it as cheap as possible, because they were a new nation. They didn't have a lot of money, but they knew that they had to arm themselves. So it's what was out there, it's what's to be had. Yeah. So if you come across one, right, where right up here it's actually stamped 308, right, or somewhere even stamped 762, right, that would be a Mauser, right, that was converted over, more than likely. Once again, there's books on this to confirm, but yeah, it very possibly could have been used by Israeli forces back in the day. Now, what also happened to a bunch of them is the barrel actions and receivers were actually brought into the United States, and they were scrubbed of everything and reserialized, possibly rehardened, and new markings put on them. And for those of you who have been following any of my channels for a while will kind of recognize this. This is my Mauser. Pay no attention back here. This is my Mauser, right, that I am turning into a 45 ACP that'll take 1911 mags and that kind of thing. But if you sit here and look, right, that's an American Seal Eagle, right? And the model on this one is a 98/85, right? And I'm going to cover up the serial number, and it's not going to focus. Well, maybe, right? So right here on the side, it sits here and says Federal Ordnance Inc., El Monte, California, USA. It's kind of interesting. But yes, these, after the war, a lot of them were stripped because the receivers, once again, are excellent receivers. They are still highly regarded to this day, and have been used in the custom world for many, many, many years. You're talking about from the 50s, where what we would consider modern competition shooting really kind of began, all the way up to today. There are still people in the competitive rifle game that are running Mauser actions, right? Now, granted, they've got new barrels, they've cleaned up the bolts, maybe had new ones machined, different safeties possibly, of course, different triggers, they've got scopes mounted to them, blah, 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 blah. But at its heart, it's still a 98. So yeah, anyways, I hope y'all have enjoyed this series. I plan on doing more and that kind of thing. So yeah, as always, y'all have a good one. Oh, sorry, I kind of sat here and forgot to talk about slings. Now, this came with this leather sling, right? And you can tell it's still very pliable, right? but it is not in the best of shape, right? There's a few markings on here, but none that show like German proof marks or anything like that. So I'm having a hard time believing that it is original, right? I think it is just an older reproduction. But you can tell that there is a lot of rust and corrosion and that kind of thing on this, okay? Just from years of use. Now, I've tried to sit here and clean some of this, right? But some of the stitching has come loose, right? So I'm not going to be able to clean this any further. Luckily, here fairly close to us is a boot shop, so they sell boots, but they are also a full service leather company, right? So they make saddles, they make, repair boots, they resole boots, they make wallets, they make rifle slings, and I send everyone to them that has some of these older slings because they can clean them up and restore them, right? Now, if this was an original German one, I would be hesitant to sit here and tell him to get that done. But considering that you have markings kind of like this, right? Which I know that doesn't look very good, but it's kind of got an upside down V with a line coming off the edge of it in a circle, right? That is not of anything that I've ever seen the Germans put on their guns or on their slings. I've never seen it. I could be absolutely wrong. There could be one of you that's watching this that goes, oh my God, it is, and blah, 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 blah. But I've got that same marking right here in front of my finger, which the camera's not going to show it, but then it has 2804-02 and then two more numbers behind it, right? So I don't believe that this is original, but it is, like I said, fairly old. I don't want to sit here and bend this too far and have it crack and that kind of thing. So I'm going to package this up and give it to the customer and advise him on where to go to possibly get this restored. So I don't know what it would cost or anything like that because it's not my business, but that's going to at least be an option. So honestly, for real, this time, y'all have a good one.